Let's talk about the rise of Boris Johnson. Everyone talks about the rise of Donald Trump all the time, but let's turn the focus onto Boris. How did he get to the position where he's at now?
So I think Boris is a really interesting one. I'd say neither of my parents are particularly politically engaged, but they would both know who Boris is, and they would have for a long time. Obviously, he kind of came onto the scene as a journalist, beginning as an EU correspondent, and then obviously went to move on to The Spectator. So I suppose he kind of paid somewhat of a career in that sense. Mm-hmm. He was lucky, he was funny, he was always a little bit different to kind of the atypical politician. So obviously he kind of got his appearances and his real face out there on TV, kind of doing the "Have I got news for you," as well as his news articles, which for the most part would be quite outrageous and would be in, very true Boris style, with that kind of joke, or with that kind of like outrageous line or something like that. So yeah. I think his kind of notoriety almost goes beyond politics and beyond what's kind of considered to be, interesting. In Boris himself is more interesting than politics to the everyday person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he definitely has that entertainment factor, just like Trump. When people say Boris is like more presidential, well, what do they mean when they say he's more presidential? What's the difference between like a president style versus prime minister?
A clear-cut answer I can give you is if you were to look at like the 2019 election. And I think typically in the parliamentary system, you're voting for your party and you're voting for your manifesto, which is spread across, all of these regions of healthcare, security. But for Boris in 2019, it was a contest very much surrounded by him, with his face at the forefront. And they were really utilizing that brand Boris. And it was done so on his one big policy. So obviously Trump kind of fueled on the drain the swamp, and he had kind of big stances on building the wall and things like that, whereas Boris was get Brexit done. And I think it's when you kind of strip away all of the stuff which is very typical of an election for it to be, I'm the best Conservative Party candidate. And when you strip that bare to, you're going to put that tick in the box for me. I think that's far more presidential. I mean, obviously on the ballot in America, it would say, Trump or Clinton or Biden or Trump. So it is difficult. It's different, in the constitutional sense over here. But I think in terms of kind of how the media and how campaigning can come together, that's a perfect recipe for a presidential style leader.
Yeah. What ways would you say he's unconventional? Because on the one hand, people say he just has a very different style, right? Because despite coming from an Oxford background, Eton, he doesn't necessarily live up to that typical conservative image that we all have in our heads. How would you think he's changed that?
I think he's very clever in the way he does that. And I know some people say, you're a genius when you realize Boris is the clown himself, and he's the one that, before he goes out, he'll ruffle up his hair or loosen his tie and things like that. And look, whether or not that's strictly true, there is no denying that he is a product of a character. And like I said, I think that's really what kind of gave him the appeal beyond the standard voter base. But he knows what he's doing. He released, not many people know this, but in 2004, he released a book called 72 Virgins. And it was about an MP who was a bicycle riding MP, no less. And he was embroiled in an affair campaign. But then he saved kind of his career, and he saved the day by ousting a terrorist plot. And if you consider that's something written by Boris Johnson about this kind of character, this lurky figure within Parliament who's embroiled in scandals and all of these kind of things floating around. But yet, if he can, miraculously get away out of it with his personality and with his charisma, it's almost like I say, that brand is really so not atypical of a standard politician. And I think as well, when he kind of uses his humor to his advantage, I think London 2012 was a perfect example of that. Obviously, we all know the meme of him with the flags on the zip wire and stuff. But I think if you look at some of the speeches and then some of the campaigning he done as mayor of London during that time, he hits the nail on the head. He uses a common vernacular that people are, familiar with. He will always make the pun. And I think he's kind of got that real true British spirit about him when he's at his best.